The ninth bell was already ringing, and I was running through my own city like a thief. Kings do not run. Kings arrive and the road is cleared and the gate is held. That is the arrangement. But my wolf had dragged me across 4 streets of the long yard with the single-minded fury of a creature that has decided, and I was going where it went, and the bell was going where it always went, which was on without me. Faster, my wolf said. She'll be at the awning. She's always at the awning when the bell starts. I don't know who she is, I said out loud to nobody in a street full of people. A spice seller looked up from her scales and decided very carefully to keep weighing. You do, my wolf said. You just haven't met her. That is the sort of thing it had been saying to me all summer, and it is the reason I had begun to suspect that the strongest wolf in Saravan had finally cracked like a cheap bell. Let me be plain about my wolf, because the rest of this makes no sense otherwise. Every Saravan carries one. The wolf is not a beast you become, and it is not a costume you put on. It is the older part of you, the part with a voice, and it lives behind your ribs and tells you the truth whether or not you asked. Most men's wolves chatter. Mine had not chattered since I was a boy. It gave me 2 kinds of counsel, go and don't, and it gave them the way a stone gives you a wall. My counsel found this restful. So did I. A king whose wolf does not chatter is a king who does not have to argue with himself in front of a delegation. Then at the start of summer, my wolf started talking. Not counsel, not warnings. Opinions. She'd laugh at that, it said, when a coastward emissary called my throne room austere. She likes the brass ones, it said, when a merchant showed me a tray of gate bells. Tell her the thing about your father, it said, in the middle of a grain hearing, about a story I had told no living person. Tell whom, I said. My wolf did not answer. It never answered that one. It simply went off most evenings, the way a hound goes off, not my body. My body sat in the hall being a king, but the whole live part of me pulled toward the low end of the city like a rope tightening. And it came back at dark full of things it should not have had. Jokes, the smell of pepper oil and hot brass. Somebody else's sentences, repeated to me in my wolf's voice in a woman's rhythm all summer long. You're doing the frowning thing again. Nobody's asking you to be charming. They're asking you to be honest, which for you is worse. Go home, Grump, she'll be here tomorrow. I want you to understand that I am a disciplined man. I ruled a country of red dust and short water and long grudges, and I did it without raising my voice. And I spent that summer walking my own corridors thinking, my wolf has invented a woman. My wolf has invented a woman, and she is funnier than I am. Meanwhile, my council was trying to marry me. The coastward pack controls the water road, Ylva Sarn said, laying her hands flat on the table the way she does when she has already won. Ylva has been on my council since before my crown fit. They will give us the road. They want the right. The right, of course they wanted the right. Here is Saravan's oldest embarrassment. Our alliances are not sealed by kings. They are sealed by wolves. The 2 houses stand in open hall, the candidate walks the length of it, and the king's wolf rises and goes to meet her, or it does not. It is not a trick and it cannot be faked. The whole hall can feel it happen. Our grandfathers thought this was wisdom. I think it is a country asking its own ribs for permission in front of 600 witnesses. My wolf had refused every candidate the council had ever brought me. High-born women, kind women, clever women, women I liked. It sat like a boulder and looked at the floor, and the hall went quiet in that particular way, and the woman walked back the length of the hall with her chin up while I stood there with my hands open and nothing in them. Twice I had begged it, why not her? She is good. She's good, my wolf agreed, not ours. Lady Renathole, Ylva said, sliding the letter across. The coast Alpha's sister. She has agreed to walk the right at the sun feast. And if my wolf sits on its hands again, we insult the only pack that can cut our water. Then don't let it, Ylva said. That is not how it. I know how it works, Tavian. I am telling you that the whole country is watching a king whose wolf will not choose, and the country is beginning to say the word broken, and the word after broken is replace. She gathered her papers. Whatever it is that has your wolf out in the long yard every evening, settle it, before the feast. So my wolf had been noticed, wonderful. Which is why, when the 9th bell started that night, and my wolf hauled at me like a dog on a strap, I let it. You need to know about the bell, too, or none of the rest lands. Ambry is a caravan city. Everything we eat comes up the red road on somebody's cart, and everything we sell goes back down it the same way, and the road is only safe in company. So the last caravan leaves at the 9th bell, and the sun gate, 40 feet of banded timber, the pride of my great-grandmother, shuts behind it. Not a minute after. Not for weight of coin, not for rank, not for weeping. My great-grandmother hanged a gate captain for holding it, and Ambry has told that story every night since, the way you tell a child about the dark. Miss the 9th bell and the road doesn't want you. Miss the 9th bell and you're in the city till dawn, whatever's waiting for you down the road. A sick mother, a wedding, a man. Every evening the low city runs. That is Ambry's real music, not the bell, the running. Boys with sacks, girls with letters, drovers swearing, whole families hauling grandmothers. The awnings shaking, everyone shouting the same word, which is go, go, go. And every evening, apparently, my wolf ran with them. It took me down through the spice row, past the brass stalls, into the long yard, where the caravan carts pack up nose to tail and the dust hangs gold in the last light. And it stopped me at the edge of a tally house. A low open-fronted shed with a striped awning, a scarred counter, and a hanging lamp. And I heard a woman say, "Absolutely not. That's a terrible idea, and you know it's a terrible idea, which is why you brought it to me instead of him." I stepped back into the awning shadow, like a boy caught in an orchard. She was leaning on the counter with a tally stick in one hand, arguing at the empty air beside her stool. Around her the yard was pandemonium. 2 of her brothers were roping a cart badly and shouting about it. An aunt was auditing a drover at volume. Somebody's goat was on a table. She was in the middle of all of it, and she wasn't raising her voice, and everybody heard her anyway. That is a thing some people can do. I have never been able to do it. I have a crown instead. "If he wants the woman to stay," she said, "he has to say a sentence, an actual sentence out of his actual mouth." Silence, not real silence, yard silence, cart wheels and swearing. But in the middle of it, a shape of quiet where an answer went. "No," she said. Looking at her is not a sentence, Grump. My wolf beside me made a sound I had never heard it make in my life. It was pleased. "Don't sulk," she said, and she reached down absently and scratched at nothing, at the air by her knee, at the exact height of a wolf's head, and my whole spine went hot because I felt it. I am going to try to tell you what that was, and I am going to fail. It was not a lightning strike. It was not a hand on my heart. It was worse. It was the feeling of walking into a room and discovering that everything you have never said, every private thing you have kept behind your teeth for 30 years because a king does not get to put those things down, every one of them had already been said. Out loud, in this yard, with the goat on the table. Not stolen, told. By me in my own voice. And answered. I have been in 3 wars. Nothing has ever frightened me like that. "Grump," she said, "you're standing on my foot." The wolf was not standing on her foot. The wolf was standing next to me, 40 feet away, and the wolf was delighted. She straightened up, looked out into the yard, into the dust and the gold light, right at the awning shadow where I stood, and she did not see me, but something in her face changed, the way a face changes when a familiar sound comes from the wrong direction. Then her aunt bellowed that the drover was lying about his barrel count, and she said, "He always lies about his barrel count," and she was gone into the noise. I walked back up to my hall and sat down and did not sleep. Because here is what I understood, sitting there with the lamps burning down. My wolf had not invented a woman. My wolf had found one, and it had told her everything. I went back the next evening. I would like to say I went for statecraft. I went because I had to know how bad it was. It was worse. I stood at the end of the counter in a plain coat with the crest turned inside, like a man doing a stupid thing carefully, and I listened to Safi Oren. I had her name by then. The whole yard shouts it roughly once a minute, run a tally house, insult 4 members of her own family, price a barrel of pepper oil, and hold in the gaps a running conversation with my wolf. "He didn't," she said, laughing to the air. "He sat there and let the man call his hall austere. And said nothing." A pause. "Because he's proud, Grump. That's not a mystery, that's just a man. Tell her the thing about the bells," my wolf said to her in front of me with no shame whatsoever. "He does not collect gate bells," she said. "Nobody collects gate bells. He has 40. He has 40, she said, and then she put her face in her hands and laughed until her aunt asked what was wrong with her, and she said nothing, and her aunt said, "You're talking to that dog again." And she said, "He's not a dog." And her aunt said, "It's a dog, Safi," and Safi said, "He's worse." I want to be clear that I was, at this point, standing 8 feet away, dying. Everything, she had everything. She had my father's story, she had the bells. She had the fact that I hate the coastward emissaries' laugh, and the fact that I sleep badly in summer, and the fact that when my mother died I sat in the stable until dawn because I did not want the hall to see me do it. My wolf had put all of it on that counter, evening after evening, the way a cat brings you birds. And she had never once been cruel about any of it. That is the thing that took my legs out from under me. She could have been. Half the country would pay in gold for a single one of those birds. She had them all, and what she did with them was laugh at me the way you laugh at someone you have decided to be fond of. And then, every time, without fail, she'd say some version of the same thing. Tell him to go and say it, Grump, whatever it is, to whoever it is. Say it out loud like a person. He won't, my wolf said. Then he deserves what he gets, said Safi Oren, and went back to her tally stick. I came back the evening after that, and the one after. I was a beggar at my own table by then, and I knew it, and I did not care. I stood at the end of her counter and let her think I was a drover with a slow tongue, and she talked to me. She talks to everyone. A stranger at her counter is just a chair that hasn't been filled, and I learned things about her that my wolf had not thought to steal. That she has 4 brothers, 3 of them useless. That her mother was a road woman and her father counted barrels, and she has done both. That she can add a column of figures faster than my treasury in her head while insulting a cousin. That she has never in her life been anywhere alone. That the Orens travel as a weather system. And that she is late for everything. Every evening the 9th bell would start, and Safi Oren would be halfway through a tally, and the whole yard would start yelling her name, and she would say a word I will not repeat and run, down the row, through the dust, past the brass stalls, hair coming down, arms full, and she would make the sun gate by a hair every time, laughing, hauling her own aunt by the wrist. The last of the running, every single night. Look at her go, my wolf said, the first time, in a voice of such open, unguarded, undefended love that I had to put my hand on a post. That was the night I stopped pretending this was about statecraft. She caught me on the 5th evening. Of course she did. The yard had gone quiet, an actual quiet, a between caravans lull, and I made the error of laughing at something she said. Not out loud, just enough. She turned around. She looked at me for a long moment with her head slightly tilted, the way she looks at a barrel count that doesn't add. Then she said, carefully, Grump, is your man standing at my counter? My wolf the trader said, yes. She heard it, I watched her hear it. I watched the color go out of her face and then come back all at once, and I watched her put both hands flat on the counter, and I watched Safi Oren, who I would learn is unembarrassable in all matters concerning other people, and only other people, go a shade of red I have not seen outside a forge. How much, she said, have you heard? All of it, I said. All of it. Since when? Since the 9th bell 5 days ago. She closed her eyes. The 40 bells, she said. 41 now. Oh, that's worse. I have been told. Your Majesty. Please don't, I said, and it came out lower and rower than I meant, and she stopped. We stood there in her tally house with the lamp swinging and the dust going gold, and I made myself say the rest of it, because I am not a coward, whatever my wolf tells people. You've had every private thing I own, I said, handed to you all summer by a creature I cannot govern. You could have sold it, you could have laughed at it, you did neither. I had to stop. I came down here to find out how much damage had been done. And what I found was that somebody has been kind to the worst part of me every evening for a season, and I didn't know her name. Safi Oren looked at me. Then she said, I thought you were a widower. What? He wouldn't say who he belonged to. He just arrived, and he was so sad about everything, and he kept telling me about a man who sits alone in stables and won't talk to anybody. She waved a hand. I built a whole man. I built a sad little man with 40 bells and no wife, and I have been giving him advice, and he was you and your. She gestured at all of me, the height, the shoulders, the ruinous fact of the crown. You're not a sad little man. I am, I said, extensively. She laughed. She had to grab the counter. And my wolf said very quietly to both of us, in a voice like a door opening, tell her my name. I had not said it in 20 years. Wolves have names. You do not hand them out. It's the closest thing a Saravan has to a skin. Bramwell, I said. She went still. You've been calling him Bramwell this whole time and letting me call him Grump. He didn't correct you. He let me. I liked it, said Bramwell. She sat down on her stool very suddenly. Oh, she said. Oh, this is bad. Yes. No, you don't, my family. My family will find out. My aunt will find out, and then the road will find out, and by the feast there will be a song, Majesty, there is always a song. The bell started. The first stroke of the ninth, over the roofs, and the whole yard went off like a startled flock, carts and shouting and go, 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 and Safi Oren looked at the gate and looked at me and said, I have to. Go, I said. She went, hair coming down, arms full, hauling her aunt by the wrist, the last of the running, right through the closing dark of the sun gate with the timber swinging behind her. Well, said Bramwell in my chest in the sudden quiet, now you've done it. There was a song by the feast. There is always a song. It was not a kind song, and it was not about her. It was about me, and it involved the bells, and I had to sit through 2 verses of it at a border table while an Ashland trader tried not to die. But the version that reached my council was not a song. She's a listener, Ilva said. She said it the way you'd say plague. Tavian, do you know what the coast will do with that? Their right depends on a wolf being unreadable. If it goes out that the king of Saravan has a woman in the long yard who can hear what wolves think. She can hear what my wolf thinks, I said, because my wolf has been shouting at her since spring. They will call her a spy. They will say you had the eccentrite rigged before Lady Rena set foot in the hall. They will cut the water road and they will be cheered for it. Ilva leaned in. Cancel it. Send her out of the city. Walk the right clean. No. Tavian. She has done nothing but be born able to hear something and be decent about what she heard. I stood. Walk the right, all of it, in open hall. Let them look. Ilva looked at me for a long moment. Your wolf is going to sit down again, she said, isn't it? Almost certainly, I said. The sun feast fills the great hall of Ambry to the walls, and half the long yard comes up in its good coats to watch the highborn be ridiculous. Coast delegation on one side in their gray. My council on the other. 600 people, and a lane down the middle of them, and wolves, real ones, the pack wolves that come in off the ridge for the feast and lie along the walls like gray furniture, because a Saravan right without wolves in it is just furniture and lying. Lady Rena Thole walked the lane. She did it well. She is a good woman with a straight back who deserved a better afternoon than the one I gave her. She walked the whole length of that hall in the total silence of a country holding its breath, and she stopped in front of my chair. And Bramwell sat. Not rudely, not even coldly. It simply did not rise, and everyone in the hall felt it not rise, and I heard 600 people breathe out at once. Her brother, the Coast Alpha, stood up. You knew, he said. You knew before she walked. I did, I said. Then you have insulted my house on purpose, in front of. I have refused to lie to your house on purpose, in front of everyone, I said. Which is the only honest thing that has happened in this hall in 10 years. And that is when Bramwell got up. I felt it go through me. He rose and he came down off the dais, and he went past Lady Rena, and past her brother, and past my council with their mouths open, down the lane into the crowd, into the packed low city end of the hall where the long yard stood in its good coats. And he sat down at Safi Oren's feet. The hall made a noise like a wave. And Bramwell, my wolf, the silent stone of my ribs, the terror of 2 borders, said to her, in front of every soul in Saravan. He's frowning, fix his face. And Safi Oren, who was standing there in her aunt's good green coat, in a crowd off guard in the middle of a state right, said out loud in her ordinary voice, with an entire kingdom listening. He always frowns, leave him alone. I have heard silence before, that was a different animal. 600 faces turned to her. Her aunt's hand went over her own mouth. The Coast Alpha said into that silence in a voice of pure vindication, There it is. And Safi Oren's whole face went white as she understood exactly what she had just done, in front of the whole world, and I watched her decide. I watched her not to run. She lifted her chin. Yes, she said to the hall, I hear him. You rigged, the Coast Alpha began. I've never spoken to your sister in my life, Safi said. I've never spoken to him, she pointed at me, at her king, with a tally keeper's total absence of ceremony, until 5 days ago, and I spent that conversation apologizing. What I have done, Alpha, is sit in a tally house all summer and listen to a lonely wolf complain about his idiot man. Somebody at the back of the long yard end laughed. One person. It was, I later learned, her brother Bo, who is useless. And what, said the Coast Alpha, did the idiot man's wolf tell you? I stood up. I want to say I planned what came next. I didn't. I had spent 30 years keeping every private thing behind my teeth because a king does not get to put those things down, and I had spent one summer learning that the only person who had ever taken any of it out of my hands had done it gently, and I was tired, and the hall was waiting. So I did the thing she had been telling my wolf to make me do since spring. I said a sentence, out loud like a person. He told her that I sat in the stable when my mother died, I said, because I did not want you to see me do it. The hall went absolutely still. He told her that I hate the Coast emissary's laugh, which is true and small of me, and I apologize. He told her I collect gate bells, which is ridiculous, and I do. He told her everything I have not said to any of you in 10 years of standing at the front of this room. I came down off the dais. And she never once used it, not for coin, not for spite, not for advantage. She just answered him, every evening, kindly, believing he belonged to some sad man she'd never meet. I stopped in front of her, in the lane, in front of my whole country. So no, Alpha, the right was not rigged, I said. The right worked. It has worked every time. My wolf has refused every woman this hall ever put in front of it, and none of you asked why. And the answer is that it was already sitting outside a tally house in the long yard every night, being honest with somebody, which is more than I managed. Ylva Sarn, I am told, put her face in her hands. She says she was thinking. I know what she was doing. You want the water road, I said to the Coast Alpha. Take it. Full terms, no marriage, no right, and my hand on it in front of these witnesses, because your sister deserves better than to be handed to a man whose ribs are somewhere else, and because I am not going to buy a river with a lie. I turned. Lady Rena, I'm sorry. You walked that hall with more grace than anyone in it deserved. She looked at me for a moment. Then, to her brother's visible horror, Rena Tholes smiled. Keep your bells, Majesty, she said. And then I had to turn around and face the only part of the afternoon that frightened me. Safi Oren was staring at me from 6 inches away with her ears scarlet and her chin still up. Don't, she said quietly. Not here. Not in front of you. Can't ask a woman a thing like that in front of 600 people. It isn't a question, it's a press. Bramwell at her feet said nothing at all. I know, I said. I'm not going to. And I walked away and let her stand in her aunt's good green coat and be looked at by nobody, because they were all looking at me. I asked her at the gate. The 9th bell was ringing, of course it was. She was late, and the long yard was running, and the whole city was shouting, go, 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 and I stood in the gateway of the Sun Gate with my hand up, and the gate captain, to his eternal credit, only said, Majesty, once. She came down the row at a dead run with her arms full and her aunt in tow, and she saw me standing in the gap of her own gate, and she stopped so hard the aunt hit her. You're holding the gate, she said, appalled. Your great-grandmother hanged a man. I'm awares. There is a song. There are 2 now, I said. Safi, I'm going to say the sentence and then you're going to walk through this gate, and no is a real answer and it costs you nothing. Not the tally house, not your family's contracts, not this road. Say no, and I'll hold the gate for you tomorrow the same as tonight. She stood there with the dust going gold around her, and the bells still ringing, and her whole enormous shouting family piling up behind her. Say it then, she said. You have been the only quiet in my life for a whole summer, I said, and you didn't know I was in the room. Stay in it. Not as anything the council has a word for. Just stay in the room and keep telling me to fix my face. Safi Oren looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, You're standing on my foot. I was not standing on her foot. I was, I understood, a half-second before Bramwell would have told me, being answered. The bell finished. The gate did not shut. It has not shut on the 9th stroke since. They call it the late bell now. 1 minute every night between the 9th stroke and the timber, a minute that officially does not exist, that appears in no ordinance, that my council pretended for a full year was a fault in the mechanism. 1 minute, so that whoever is running down the Spice Row with their arms full and their hair coming down, and their whole shouting family behind them gets to make it. Ambry loves it. Ambry has decided it is a very old custom. There is a song about that too, and it's a better song. I stand in the gap most nights because I am a king and there is nobody to tell me not to. I hear the yard go off. I hear the carts and the swearing and the go, 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 and then I hear her coming, late, always late, laughing, hauling her aunt by the wrist, and I do not say anything, and I do not have to. Because Bramwell, for the first time since spring, has nothing whatsoever to say. He doesn't need to. She's already here. The grain hearing is worth telling properly, because it was the first time I understood I was in trouble. 60 landholders in my hall, arguing about water the way Saravans argue about water, which is to say as though every man in the room had personally dug the wells. Old Corvin Ash had been on his feet for a quarter of an hour explaining that the Ridge farms deserved priority because his grandfather had bled for the Ridge. And I was doing what I always do, which is sit perfectly still with my chin on my knuckles and let a man talk himself out of his own argument. And Bramwell said, "Your father used to do that." I did not move. The chin thing. He did it to the Ash's grandfather in this same room, and afterward he told you it wasn't patience. It was that he couldn't remember any of their names and needed the extra minute. I had told that to nobody, not to Ilva, not to my mother. It was a small, stupid, tender thing a dying man said to a boy of 11, and I had kept it for 22 years the way you keep a coin in a coat you don't wear. She'd love that, Bramwell said, tell her. Majesty, said Corvin Ash. 60 faces. I had apparently been sitting there long enough for a hall to notice. The Ridge gets its priority, I said, when the Ridge stops selling its allotment down the road at a markup in the dry month. Your grandfather bled for the Ridge, Corvin, you lease it. They talk about that hearing still. They call it the moment the king's temper finally showed. It was not my temper. It was a man being robbed in his own throne room by a voice behind his ribs and having nothing to hit. I came back the evening after that, and the one after. I told my guard I was walking the low market for the price of pepper oil, and my guard, who has known me since I was 19, said, "Yes, Majesty," in the voice of a man who intends to say nothing to anyone ever and has a niece in that yard. Here is what a tally house is, in case you have only ever seen the top of a country. Every barrel that comes up the red road gets counted twice, once by the drover who wants it to be more, once by the buyer who wants it to be less, and between those two liars sits a tally keeper, who is paid by both and trusted by both, and is therefore the most powerful person in the long yard and the poorest. Safi Oren's counter was a plank scarred with 40 years of chalk. Her stool had one short leg. Behind her hung a rope of tally sticks like a butcher's larder, and every stick was somebody's word. On my second evening, a drover named Hesk tried to argue a count with her. 41 barrels, said Hesk. 38, said Safi without looking up. 41, I loaded them myself at. 38 barrels, 2 of which are half oil and half road water, so call it 37, Hesk, and I'll write 38 because your mother's kind to me. She looked up. Or we can open them here in the yard in front of Rennick's man and I'll write what falls out. Hesk paid on 38. She does that 6 times a night, Bramwell said, in the tone of a man showing you his horse. On the third evening, her aunt audited her. The aunt is called Merritt Oren, and she is 4 feet and 11 inches of pure adversarial arithmetic, and she went through Safi's day book at the counter, out loud, with commentary, while Safi worked around her like weather. You've written the ash consignment at 11. It's 11. It's 12. It's 11, and the 12th is Beau's, and Beau hasn't paid the yard fee since the spring. And if I write 12, you'll go and shout at Beau, and then Beau will cry, and then I will have to hear about it. Beau should cry, said Merritt Oren. Beau should, Safi agreed. Write 11. Beau is the useless one, Bramwell explained. There are 3 useless ones. Beau is the flagship. I laughed. Out loud, at the end of a counter in a plain coat with my crest turned in, standing among drovers. Nobody noticed. That is what the long yard is, a place so loud that a king can laugh in it and be nothing. I had not been nothing since I was 17 years old. I stood there in the noise with my hands in my sleeves and the dust going gold, and I thought, with the clarity of a man discovering he has been ill for a decade. So this is what the rest of them have. On the 4th evening she talked to me. I want to be precise about this because it matters later. She did not talk to me because I was interesting. She talked to me because I was standing at her counter and had been for 3 evenings, and a chair that hasn't been filled is, to Safi Oren, a personal insult. You, she said, drove her. Escort, I said. Whose? Grain. Up from the border. Then you're being robbed, she said, and dropped a tally stick in front of me. Border grain came in at 9 barrels a cart this season, and every one of you is signing for 8 because the factor tells you the 9th spoilage, and it isn't spoilage, it's the factor's cousin. Tell your captain to count off the cart, not off the paper. I'll tell him, I said. He won't listen. He might. He won't, they never do. She went back to her stick. Men would rather be robbed than told. She's right, said Bramwell cheerfully. You've been robbed by that factor for 2 years. I stood there and was robbed by a factor for 2 years and said nothing at all, and Safi Oren looked up at me with a face of enormous kindness and said, Don't take it hard. You've got a slow tongue, that's all. Slow tongue's not the same as slow. I have been given 3 crowns worth of compliments in my life. I have kept exactly one. The coast delegation arrived while I was doing this. They came up the water road in gray, 40 riders and a woman, and they were 3 days early, which is what you do when you want to see a hall before it has been arranged for you. I met them at the gate in my crown and my good coat, and every inch of the thing I am supposed to be. And Velen Thol, the coast alpha, a broad, cold, careful man who has never in his life said a sentence he had not costed, looked at my city and said, You've let the yard grow up against your wall. The yard is the wall, I said. I said Velen Thol. His sister was behind him. Rena Thol came off her horse without help, in road dust, and she looked at the sun gate for a long moment with her head back the way you look at a thing you'd heard about. And then she said the first honest sentence anyone from the coast had said to me in 10 years. Does it really not open? It really doesn't. For anyone. My great-grandmother hanged a captain for holding it. Good, said Rena Thol with feeling. I liked her immediately, that was the trouble. We dined that night with the whole thing on the table, the water road, the eccentrite, the feast, and Velen laid it out like a factor. The coast holds the river's head. Saravan drinks. In a dry year, the coast can close a sluice and put my country on its knees without drawing a blade. And both of us knew it, and neither of us said it, and every clause we spoke instead was a way of saying it. The right settles it, Velen said. Your wolf accepts my sister. The houses are one house. The road is open in perpetuity. And if my wolf doesn't accept her? Velen Thol looked up from his cup. Then the country that couldn't be married, he said, gets to negotiate. Rena, at his elbow, went very slightly still. She had heard the shape of that sentence, too. He's not offering you a wife, Bramwell said. He's offering you a trap with a wife in it. If I stand, he has your throne inside a generation. If I sit, he has your river tomorrow, and the whole road will say you insulted him first. That was the most useful thing my wolf had said to me since spring. I've been useful all summer, Bramwell said, wounded. You just didn't like the subject. Later, at the end of the hall, Rena Thol stopped beside me and said, quietly, without any of her brother in her voice at all, Your wolf refuses everyone. They told me before I came. She adjusted her glove. I'd rather you didn't pretend to be surprised on the day. I can walk a hall and be refused, Majesty. I've done harder, but I'd like to know I was doing it on purpose. It will refuse you, I said. Thank you, said Rena Thol and went to bed. I stood in my own hall for a long time after that with 40 gate bells in a chest upstairs and a woman in the long yard who thought I was a widower, and I understood exactly what I was. A man with a country in one hand and nothing in the other, being asked to spend the only true thing left in him on a river. Say something, Bramwell said. To whom? Anyone, said my wolf. You haven't said a true sentence in this hall in 9 years. Start anywhere. Ylva Sarn came to my chamber the night the song started. She did not knock. She has not knocked since I was 22, on the grounds, her words, that a man who wants privacy should not have taken a job with a hall attached. There's a song, she said. I've heard it. You have not heard this one? She sat down without being asked. The one in the low city is about the bells, and it's vulgar, and I don't care. The one that came up the water road this afternoon is about a woman in the long yard who can hear what wolves think, and it has your wolf's name in it, Tavian." The room went cold. "Nobody knows his name," I said. "Somebody knows his name." Her aunt, I thought, or Beau, or a drover with a good ear and a bad debt. It did not matter. In a caravan city, a secret is just a commodity that hasn't found its price. "Do you understand what the coast will do with this?" Ilva leaned forward. "Their whole right depends on a wolf being unreadable. That's the point of it. That's why it's honest. That's why two countries agreed to be bound by it 400 years ago. If Velenthol can stand up in your hall and say that the king of Saravan keeps a woman who can hear his wolf, then the right isn't a right. It's a puppet show. He doesn't even have to prove it. He only has to say it in a room with 600 witnesses and a song already in their heads. She's never met him. She's never met his sister. She's never met me until 5 days ago." 5 days, Ilva stopped, closed her eyes. "You've been down there." "Yes." "You have been going down into the long yard, alone, at the 9th bell, in a plain coat." "Yes." Ilva Sarn sat back in her chair and looked at the ceiling of my chamber for a while. "Send her out of the city," she said, "tonight. Give her a road warrant and a good sum and a reason. The Ashland tallies, the border count, anything. She's a tally keeper. Invent an audit. She's gone a month, the feast happens. The right is clean. Whatever your wolf does, it does in front of witnesses with no woman in the hall to point at. And after you're a king with a water road, and she's a tally keeper with a purse, and the song dies because songs about nothing die." It was good advice. I want that written down. It was the best advice anyone gave me that whole summer, and it was given by a woman who has kept me alive through 2 borders and 1 very bad winter, and has never once asked me for anything. "No," I said. "Tavian." "She has done nothing," I said, "except be born able to hear something and be decent about what she heard, every evening, for a season, to a creature she thought belonged to some sad man she'd never meet." I found I was standing. "If the price of my river is that I make that woman disappear from her own city in the dark with a purse and a lie, then the coast can keep the river, Ilva, and I'll dig wells." "You can't dig a river." "Then I'll be the king who couldn't. There have been worse." Ilva Sarn looked at me for a long moment. And then, and I did not expect this, and I have never fully forgiven her for it, because it is the reason I did what I did in the hall, she said. "There he is." "What?" "Nothing." She stood, gathering her papers, entirely herself again. "Walk the right then, all of it, in open hall, and Tavian," at the door without turning, "your wolf is going to sit down again." "Almost certainly," I said. "Good," said Ilva Sarn, and left. The hall did not empty for 2 hours. Halls never do after the interesting thing. Everybody stands about pretending to look for their coat. Velenthol took the water road. He took it because I gave it to him in front of 600 witnesses with nothing attached, and there is no leverage in a gift. He signed at my own table with his jaw set, and as he set the pen down he said, quietly, so only I could hear, "That was clumsy." "It was," I agreed. "You gave away a generation of advantage in front of your whole court, because a tally keeper told your wolf to fix your face." "Yes." Velenthol looked at me with the first real curiosity I had ever seen in him. "My grandfather said Saravans were unserious," he said, and stood, and went to find his sister. Rena Thol was already at the door with her gloves on, being congratulated by people who had no idea what for. She saw me, and raised an eyebrow the exact height of a woman who has just watched a public disaster she was supposed to be the center of, and was not. "I want it on record," she said, "that I walked that hall very well." "You walked it better than anyone and it deserved." "I did," she pulled her glove straight. "Your tally keeper's going to have a bad month." "That landed somewhere under my ribs. I know. They'll say she witched you. They'll say it in the low city first because the low city's proud of her and pride goes sour faster than spite." Rena Thol shrugged. "It isn't a warning, Majesty. It's just true, and you've all been so busy being astonished that nobody said it to her." "What would you do?" "I'd say it in the hall," she said. "You're a king. Say the true thing about her before somebody else says the false one. You seem to have found a talent for it this afternoon." She looked past me at the crowd, at the gray delegation at her brother's back. "Late in life, but there we are." And then Merritt Oren came through the crowd like weather. 4'11", straight at me. 600 people got out of her way, including, I noticed, 2 of my guard. "Majesty," she said. "Mistress Orin, my niece is standing in the corner of your hall in my good green coat with her ears on fire and half your court asking her what your dead mother's name is." She said it flat, the way she reads a daybook. "You've made her a thing. She wasn't a thing this morning. She was a tally keeper with a full rope and a bad brother and every drover on the red road trusting her word, and by tomorrow she'll be the woman who hears wolves. And do you know what a drover does with a tally keeper who hears things?" I had not thought of it, not once, not in 5 days. "He goes to a different counter," I said. "He goes to a different counter," said Merritt Orin. "So, you've had your afternoon. Now what do you propose to do about her rope?" Which is how the king of Saravan came to be publicly instructed, at his own sun feast, on the economics of trust, by a woman who came up to his sternum. "An audit," I said slowly. "Open, crown witnessed. Every stick on her rope, every book, 3 years back, read out by your enemies, Rennick's man, the ashes, whoever hates her most, in the long yard where the road can watch." Merritt Orin's eyes narrowed, "And if they find a fault?" "They won't." "They won't," she agreed. "But you'd better mean it, boy, because if you call the road to look at her books and then flinch, you'll have done what the coast couldn't." "I don't flinch." "You flinched all summer," said Merritt Orin. "You sent your dog." And she walked off into the crowd, and my wolf, who had not made a sound since Safi answered him, said, in a very small voice, "I like her.